Andy, you've shared with us the kind of rich opportunities for ministry when the real just breaks in. A heartache, a disappointment, a life reversal, an existential crisis, or even a moment of great joy creates an opportunity to work through with a young person where God is in the midst of this suddenly very real experience. But there will be weeks after weeks of youth ministry when these opportunities don't open during that particular week. Are there ways in which we can facilitate conversations, create possibilities and space in a youth group meeting where the real we can open ourselves to the real without inviting them just to serially spill or to manipulate them, but rather create space, a conversation, which that's where we end up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe the way to answer that question is to start a little bit, maybe at 10,000 feet just for a second, and to say that my own perspective, and you can see this probably, maybe clearly in my writing, maybe not, but my perspective is really an understanding of event, in that God encounters us in an event, that there's this event that occurs, and that when God breaks in, when God moves, that it becomes this event of encounter, this event of revelation. And that's what I'm presuming in this idea that reality breaks in, that something happens, that our regular lives are punctured, and sometimes it's suffering. And particularly in my theological perspective of a God who meets us in those experiences of suffering, really is not to say suffering is good and we should punch kids emotionally or maybe really in the stomach to make them suffer. It's really to say what I'm more interested in is where and how God shows up. And my understanding of that is really in this idea of event, of God breaking forth. Now the question is a great one, which is, well, it just seems like everything's kind of baseline. There's no puncturing. I mean, my kids are middle-class kids, and everything just seems normal. At one level, my argument for that wants to be, well, you're not looking hard enough. And maybe particularly with middle-class kids who seem to have everything going right for them. But there is a sense, and I think this is a human experience, that we deny a lot of these experiences, or we don't feel safe to articulate them. And I think part of our job within our youth groups, particularly in those times we gather, is to not see the youth group time, which we so often do, as a zone to get them to know something, or as a zone to get them entertained so that they have a good experience at church so they come back. It's like, it's a branding experience where you really liked it, so you're going to continue to buy it. We often, I think, intuitively, tacitly kind of function that way. I actually want us to see our youth group times, our times in our calendars where we gather young people, as places, as zones for the possibility of really encountering each other and sharing in each other's lives. And so it's not just about fronting suffering and pain so that they feel something and, oh, this is sad. It's also about just sharing in each other's humanity, which I think a core piece of sharing each other's humanity is in sharing in each other's brokenness, but it's also sharing each other's joy. And joy has a way of showing that we're in need as well. And I think there's something significant about people sharing in each other's need. So it leads us to kind of have to ask really practically, like, how do you create that space for that to occur? And for me, the way I've done that in my own ministry, that's been significant. The way I've seen other really talented youth workers and confirmation teachers and others do that is I know of a pastor in St. Paul, which he's a really incredibly creative guy, and one of the things that he did that my wife actually has done as well, it's really significant, is his idea, which is to give each kid in his small group, about 8 kids, give them an iTunes card, and then tell them to go away and that they can take this iTunes prepaid card and to make a CD. And to make a CD not of songs that they think their pastor would that they would think their pastor would want to listen to or think they're okay for listening to, but songs that make them think, or songs that make them question, or actually the way I would frame it theologically is songs that remind them that they are caught between possibility and nothingness. And then to bring those songs back, and then what he does in his confirmation classes, each week a kid shares that story, or shares that song, excuse me, and then they reflect on it, think about it. And inevitably, it's a very mysterious thing, but I think when we share those, that the young person is almost pulled into telling their story. Say, oh, well, the reason I like this song is because, well, yeah, I guess it just, I don't know, the way that this lyric goes, it reminds me of when my dad left, or You know, I've always really struggled with school, and this song makes me feel like maybe there's hope for me. I mean, that leads into these narratives of sharing, and I think it is through story that we share in each other's lives. And so I think using a concrete practice like that, or finding ways to get kids to tell their story with each other, becomes a really, I think, incredibly significant thing of how we can allow them to have the space to actually do that. I think that becomes the significant thing to do, and it allows for the event to occur, the event of actually encountering each other and seeing each other and sharing in each other's lives.